Vidya Shankar, he completed his B Architecture from National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli. He did his graduate training with architect Kukke Subramania, Bangalore, which was his initiation into the design practice. He then went on to pursue his Masters in Architecture from CEPT University, Ahmedabad, specializing on architecture, theory and design. During the years 2007-2010, he was working as an associate architect with the architect P.G. Sivakumar, Tiruchirappalli from Tamil Nadu, where gained design experience on varieties of projects ranging from college campuses to small residences. He then scaled heights by working with the architect Dean de Cruz, Goa, during the years 2013 to 2014. He received the opportunity to work on projects of intense design explorations with a master architect on varieties of projects including an art gallery, boutique hotel, housing and residential projects, all in Goa. Today, Vidya Shankar stands to be an esteemed visiting lecturer at few reputed architectural schools in Trichy, where he continues his academic interests through teaching.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series. We will be seeing the subject Theory of Architecture 1, and we will be discussing the topic Aspects of Architecture, and which can also be called as Components of Architecture. The contents of this discussion are architecture as an organism, then we will be seeing the aspect of form of architecture, the structure of architecture, the material of architecture, and finally the skin of architecture. Before we start the discussion, we should put a question asking, is architecture a static non-living entity? Is architecture just an object? In fact, if we have to say as a layman, we will all say architecture is a non-living thing. But we have to see architecture as a living organism before we proceed into this discussion. And before proceeding into it, we will see what does a living organism means. A living organism is something which is not constant and which is not static. It is in constant interaction with its surrounding. Also, it has a dynamic function that happens within itself. An organism gets birth, and it grows and it dies. A living organism like a plant or a human being, it has many movement or activity within it, and also it interacts with the outside world. And a human or a tree or any organism for that case happens to gives a birth, and it grows, it matures, and finally it dies. Even architecture is similar in all the above aspects that we discuss, except that the process of growth, function and decay may be unnoticeably very slow. If you see this complete process of growth and interaction with surrounding and interaction within itself, if we compare a human organism with that of a tree, the entire process is very slow in a tree or a plant life. If we compare architecture with that of a tree, it is even slow, but we can't totally deny a plant is a non-living thing. The same way we can't deny architecture is a non-living thing. Architecture also has, in a philosophical way, have a life to it, and that is what the discussion is taken forward like. A plant, an animal, a human being, or an automobile, a city, a landscape or an architecture, all of the above are similar in many ways as an organism. Not just the living entities that is mentioned above, the plant, animal and human being, and even the non-living entities that is mentioned like the automobile, city, landscape and architecture, they are also in a way or organisms. If you take for example a car, which is an automobile, it is not something which is static. It has many systems and movements within itself, and it actually interacts with its surrounding like how an animal or a plant behaves. In the same way, a city also, it grows, it was given a birth, it grows, and actually it dies and decays like any organism. The same way, it is the entire principle is applicable to architecture also. And all these cases, whether living or non-living, you can observe there is a similarity. They all have a similar aspects to them. They have an aspect what is called as an overall form. They have an inner structure within them, and they all have an exterior skin, and they are all have a materiality, the material with which they are all made up of, and they all have a specific function for which they are all born for. These are all the common aspects that we are going to discuss in detail in this chapter. A common aspect for both the living and non-living things. First, we will see in detail the aspect of what is called as a form. In each and every discussion further, we will first take the case of nature. We will study what is a form or a material means in nature. Then we will compare that with that of architecture. That is going to be the format of comparison in the further discussion in this lecture. In nature, what does a form means in nature? Form is the overall shape of any organism. Every organism has a specific form based on its function and based on its context. Context in the sense, it may be a place or it may be the specific activity for which the organism is meant for. So, based upon the function and context, the organism will have a unique shape. And as an organism evolves in its life through centuries, even the form also evolves. For example, we can see image of a skull, a human skull, which went through many changes in its form from that of our predecessors as an animal. Every organism has its unique form that has gone through an evolution according to its function. Not just the animals, even in the plant life, even in case of a tree, every tree has a unique form. A tree can have a spherical foliage, it can have a spherical outside form, or it can have a flat canopy like a form, or it can have a conical form. But each and every form of a tree have a reason, because based upon the location of where the tree is, the tree have taken a different form. For example, researchers shows that a conical shape of a tree in a polar region is due to that it has to have a maximum sunlight intake, and also it has to shed off the snow that is falling upon it. That is why if you see, the form of a tree in a polar region will be in a conical shape. Now we will get back to architecture. Like how it was in nature, there was various forms, but for a specific reason. Even in architecture, as an organism has its own unique form based upon its function and its context. The various building typologies like a house, temple, school or museum or auditorium, etc., has a unique overall form and also an appropriate form of interior space and details, so as to accommodate the assigned function. For example, if you see the image at your right side, it is a building with a unique form. It is a museum building designed by architect Frank Lloyd Wright. The building form has a reason for it. The building, which is a museum, has a continuous ramp, which is a movement path. It is not like any other museum which have a cuboidal space. This building form has a reason behind it. And here you see certain images of a linear form, linear space buildings. These are all mostly, the first example that you see at the top is a railway station space, and the image that you see at the bottom is a building and architecture for a air terminal. Both of them have a linear form, and the linear form is due to a reason because there is a linear activity which is happening there. These buildings can't be of any other different form like circular or a squarish form. In architecture, even with the same typology of a building, say a religious building, the form can vary according to a specific context. Now we will see only the architecture of religious buildings like a temple or a mosque or a church. All the above typologies are different because they belong to different religion, and accordingly they have a different forms to them. The above typology as a place of worship have evolved to a unique form according to their functional, philosophical and cultural needs. Through the time history of more than 1000 years, they have evolved according to the activity that happened within their religious function, and that has given rise to a unique form of these building typologies. We can just see the same discussion in terms of a plan, how uniquely the plan of a religious building of a temple will be, how uniquely a plan of a religious building of a mosque will be like. If you see the sketch on the left side of our drawing board, this shows a simple in a simple manner the plan of a South Indian temple, where the main space inside does not have to be very big. It can be very small, and it is a space which is usually dark. So, and it has a space in front also, which is again not very big, which is meant for a smaller gathering. This is a form in plan of a religious building in southern India. And if you see this, it's again a simple way of a sketch showing the religious space of a mosque or any other Islamic building, where the main space for the prayer has to be very large for many people to gather and pray together. And even the front yard in front of the mosque will also be again even a bigger space for the bigger gathering, with only a small niche directing towards the Mecca. So, the basic plan itself, if you see in its form, is very unique among the same typology of what is called as a religious building. Now, we will move on to the next aspect called structure, which is the form maker of any organism, including architecture. First, we will see structure in nature. In nature, what structure means? Structure is the skeletal framework of the organism. In case of a human being, it is the bones that forms the structural system. Every organism for the given form will have a specific structure according to its function and context. For example, if you see this image below, it shows the skeletal structure of a tortoise, which have a unique reason for it. Basically, we were discussing about the form and structure for a unique reason. The skeletal bone, the main vertebrae of the tortoise, is not like a fish, which usually be in the center of the mass, but it is taken to the outside as a protective shell. And if at all a tortoise does not have to have external protection, the structure won't be like this, and eventually the form also won't be like that. So, in nature, if you see, there is a specific reason for the structure of every organism, whether it is an animal or a plant. In architecture, what structure means? Structure is the skeletal framework of the building's form. In case of a modern building, the column, the beams and the foundation all together, which form the support system, can be called as the structure, which does not include the surfaces and other massing and other non-structural wall of the building. So, if you take a simple building, a simple plan of a building which has 4 walls, in present day reinforced concrete building, they will have what is called as columns on all the corners. These 4 columns will take the entire structural load of the building, and actually these walls, if you see, they do not take any load. The building can still stand as a structure without these walls. So, what we call as a structure is excluding these walls, and it has only the skeletal framework, and it means only the skeletal framework of the building. In architecture, the form is more dependent on the structure. That was until the arrival of the modern technologies. The form in architecture was limited by the structural possibilities and techniques. For example, before the arrival of materials like steel and reinforced concretes, the structural building was built only with limited technologies like brick and stone construction. So, if at all you want to have a big library space in section, if you have a ground like this, and if you need a large covering space for a library of a span more than 40 feet, you will have to have many stout space occupying columns in between. But with the arrival of new material like steel and reinforced cement concrete, you do not have to have this in between columns. You can have just an exterior skeletal framework which can take any amount of load. So, this is one of the very important buildings in history of architecture, which is the library building, the roof of which is made out of steel. If at all the building does not have a steel truss, the building will have big stout columns in between, right in between, in the center of the reading space. Here we have an example from architecture where the structure itself forms a unique aesthetics to that building. Here In this specific case, the structure is not different from the form of the building. The structure itself is the form. Here, each and every surface is a structural element. The building does not have a separate skeleton as such, as we have seen in the previous examples. Now we will move on to the next aspect, what is called as materiality of an organism, which is the basic building unit of any organism, even in case of architecture. In nature, every organism for its given function and the context will have an appropriate material, which again will be interlinked to the form and function of the organism. In nature, it is very difficult to see the aspects of form, structure and material working separate. They are always mutually interrelated. For example, if you see any plant material, for example, if we can compare the plant material of the cactus with that of a plantain. Cactus is made up of a material which is very thick and very leathery, so that it does not leave the moisture within it. In comparison to the tree of a plantain or a banana leaf or a trunk, which is made of a very soft material which will give out water, but it can give out water because it is in a tropical climate, but a cactus can't give out water because it is in a desert climate. So based upon the function of the organism, the materiality is chosen in nature. Even within the human body, the various parts are made up of tissues and cells of different material quality to support the specific function. If you take the tissue of normal human muscle, it will be of certain quality, and if we take a tissue of a cardiac muscle of human body, it will have a lot of elasticity because it has a very unique function. So in general, nature, the choice of material is for a specific chosen function. And now coming back to architecture, architecture also has a different materiality based upon its function. Architecture as a constructed building is made up of building materials like brick and stone, etc. In early times and in rural settings in present days also, the material like mud and wood are used to create spaces. Accordingly, the form of the buildings was limited with the material construction, with those material construction techniques. Here we have an example from desert mud architecture. The material mud as a construction material gives lot of a thermal buffer to the interior space from the exterior harsh climate. So it has a thermal function. And also if you see the form of the building, the form of this building is not something which is tall and magnificent. It can't be tall because the material is made up of mud. It has only certain limited structural possibilities. So the function, the form and the materiality in architecture is all linked to each other. In architecture, the usage of material has a history within itself. There is an evolution you can see. Initially, men were using materials which are not very durable like mud and wood. Later, with the advent of stone and equally strong terracotta, burnt brick, burnt mud, people were able to make architecture which were comparably more durable. With the advantage of physical properties of those material, like their strength, the construction techniques evolved and got better. This eventually opened up more possibilities of building form and also the scale of the building. The possibilities of larger spaces and taller structures and durable structures happen after these materials. Here you can see an example of a cathedral from medieval age built totally out of stone and a few amount of glass just for the windows, and which stands even till present day due to its durability. And this magnificent form is not possible with just brick or wood or mud. This form is possible only with the quality of the material stone. So we can understand that the form of architecture is in a way related to the materiality of it. Also, it should be noted that these materials has their own psychological and aesthetical meaning, which was utilized in history. Examples of religious architecture across the world, where stone is seen to be expressing the permanence and strength of the religious faith. Also, the religious structures stood for centuries, carrying forward the religious messages through architecture. Every religious building across the world, whether it is a Hindu temple or it is a mosque or a cathedral, they will be mostly built out of stone, because stone is a durable material and it can take the religious message across centuries. And stone is also a expressive material which can take any decorative or sculptural form according to the psychological, according to the philosophical need of the religion. So stone suited the aesthetic need of the religious architecture across the world and across the centuries. Modern materials. For the past few centuries, with the advent of new construction materials like RCC, that is the reinforced cement concrete, steel, glass, etc., the possibilities of the building form have become endless. More larger form is possible, a taller form is possible, durable structures is also possible, and moreover a creative possibility of creating outworldly form have become possible due to the usage of modern materials like steel and concrete. Here you see a example of architecture which is a railway terminal built, the main structure of which is built totally on steel, and you have this substructure, the main movement space, which is built out of concrete. This expressive form in steel is not possible through other material like stone or mud or brick. With the modern materials, no more the material and the structure is a limitation for the form of architecture. Form is determined only by the function and aesthetics of architecture. In early times, the form of the building was totally dependent upon the structure and the material capability. But present day, the structural and material capabilities and possibilities are infinite. So the building form is totally based upon the required function and the concept or the aesthetics that the building has to express. This is one of the best examples to support the present idea or discussion. This is a museum building in a place called Bilbao in Spain, which has a very unique form. The concept of this building is to express the form of a fish in the water body in the front. This form is possible only through the modern materials like steel and the titanium cladding on the skin. Now we will move on to the final aspect of what is called as a skin of an organism, which gives the visual expression to the organism, which is applicable in architecture also. In nature, the aspect of skin or a shell is very crucial, which we can understand with the examples of human skin. In the human body, skin acts as the shell which holds all the internal parts together in one form. Also, skin primarily protects the inner system from the environment. Also, the skin as an expressive entity to communicate certain visual qualities to the outer world through its properties. Not just in human body, even in plant life, what is called as a skin serves all the purposes that is discussed here. In architecture, what skin means? In architecture, the skin will refer to the outer shell of the form. The outer shell that is supported by the hidden structure inside, and the outer shell which leads to the overall form of the building. The building shell or a skin will be made up of the material that is different from the structural core of the building, because both of them serves a different purpose. Here you see a picture of a building with a very interesting visual skin, which is not the structure of the building, it is supported by the structure of the building. In architecture, a skin of a building has certain crucial purposes. Skin is the one which gives the massing for the building, massing in the sense the volume and the form of the building. A skin separates the interior space from the exterior environment in architecture. The skin in architecture gives a thermal control between the exterior and the interior, and moreover the skin acts as a visual entity, as an aesthetic entity that communicates many meaning to the outer world. The image that you see on the left side, the image that you see here shows the skin of the building from inside, the skin which acts as a thermal control. The small perforation that you see in this building are all the actual movable perforations, the opening sizes of which reduces and increases according to the thermal variation, thermal condition that is needed in the interior. The skin here in this building controls both the lighting quality inside and also the thermal quality inside. So skin can perform a functional activity like that. Here you have another example of a building where skin is performing the aesthetical function in that building. The building has a unique skin form which is representing the form of the tree, the pattern of the tree branches in the front. Now, to conclude our discussion, the lecture now, we can understand that every organism has these aspects that we have shown as a figure here. Every organism has a central function, for it was given a birth, every organism has a unique function for which it have given birth, and according to the central function of the organism, it takes a unique form, and the form is supported by a structure. The structure is made up of certain material, and the structure is covered by a certain skin, which in a way gives the overall form. So, all this aspect of form, structure, material and skin, they are all interrelated to each other, and they all serves the main function for which the organism is meant to be for. We are now concluding the comparison or the analogy of how an organism function and how an architecture function, how an organism takes a unique form and structure, and how an architecture takes a unique form and structure, how materiality and the skin performs in an organism, and how materiality and skin functions in architecture. We can recall our discussion with certain questions as follows. Is architecture comparable with a living organism? If it is comparable, in what way it is comparable? List the various components or aspects of architecture. What is meant by structure in architecture? How is a building's skin is useful? Here there are certain reference books which you can refer to elaborate your understanding further. A book titled Architecture, Form, Space and Order by the author Francis D. Ketching. Another book titled Analyzing Architecture by Simon Unwin. Thank you.